All right. Hey, we are live. Hey, everybody. Chuck Holton here. How's it going? We've got a great show for you today. And if you stick around for a while and be patient, I've got a real treat for you. Just a little snippet of what I got to do today. You're going to love it. If you like Israel, if you like, the Holy Land, you're going to absolutely love this. So you don't want to stick around for a little bit. And I'll get to that after we get through the news. First, I need to say that this episode is sponsored by Preserve Gold, and we'll be talking more about them in just a few minutes. But Preserve Gold has been super faithful in their sponsorship, and I really appreciate them. So I want to give them a shout out before we just get started. All right, now let's, as we're getting started, remind you to put your where you're watching from. I'm coming to you from Jerusalem, just outside the old city, right over there, and I want to know where you're watching from. So put it in the chat, would you? Let me know where you're coming in from. Holland, Marietta, Georgia, Texarkana, Shalom. I'm really gratified at how many people here in the land are watching the show. We get approached by a lot of people as I'm out and about during the day, and they say, "Man, we watch you all the time." That's just really cool. There's somebody in Tel Aviv right there. I mean to come out to Tel Aviv here pretty soon and do some reporting in the next day or two. So maybe you'll bump into me on the street. We'll see. Uh, Somebody's watching from Iran. That'll be interesting. Nigeria, Lakeland, Florida. All right. Very cool. Well, thank you all for being here today. I spent the day with Oscar de la Blue Ramirez down in Hebron. And I'm going to talk to you a lot more about what we saw there, who we talked to, and what we learned. But let's first get to the topic at hand, and that is a likely additional strike on Iran by Israel. It appears that Israel is considering a fresh round of strikes on Iran. They're pressing for swift action. So 2 weeks ago, Israeli officials told the United States they didn't want to wait for a full diplomatic ceasefire. They have essentially a truce right now where the United States has said, all right, you stop bombing, we'll stop bombing. And Iran was like, yeah, good idea. They jumped right on that because they were getting their heads handed to them in that 12-day war. But Israel was like, yeah, okay, we'll go along with the truce, but let's give it a couple of weeks. And they made it clear at the outset when the war ended, or when the fighting stopped, not the war didn't end, but the fighting stopped, that they reserved the right to go back after Iran if they felt like they were continuing to try to threaten Israel in any way, including enriching uranium. And they felt like they had this pretty tight window of time to act on the Fordo nuclear facility, especially, and were warning that there was just this limited time frame, and if that window closed, Israel would still be at risk. And so they were willing to go it alone if necessary. Now, this fortuitous meeting, let's just say, is the timing was nice. And this meeting that just happened between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump in the White House, they met twice. They had dinner night before last, and then last night, I guess, they met again. We don't know exactly what they talked about in that second meeting, but we can, I think, glean a little bit of what Netanyahu's mindset was in wanting to go talk to President Trump by some of the things that he said to the press. So I'm going to play for you right now a quick clip from Netanyahu talking about going into Gaza, about their war in Gaza. And because there's been a lot of talk that, this whole trip was about nailing down a ceasefire. President Trump was going to be perhaps putting pressure on Netanyahu to do that. Well, that's not exactly, it doesn't sound like that's where Netanyahu's head was at. Okay. So let's listen to what he had to say to the press before he went into that second meeting.
And this is having a great change in our region. There are opportunities for peace that we intend to realize. We're working together on this. We have still to finish the job in Gaza because Gaza must have a different future. The resolute decision of President Trump to act with us against those who seek to destroy Israel and threaten the peace of the world has made a remarkable change in the Middle East. The remarkable American B-2 pilots showed remarkable perseverance, persistence, and power.
Yeah, it amazes me that Netanyahu can speak like that off the cuff. He's not reading from a teleprompter there, folks. This is something that he's really internalized. And I know that Netanyahu has had his ups and downs politically. He's facing criminal charges for bribery scandal from Qatar, of all places. And, he's got his own political problems here at home. But right now, the Israeli people, at least that I've talked to, they will tell you, look, if you want to know what we think of Netanyahu, just remember that he allowed Qatar to give money to Hamas, that he took weapons away from people in the south or refused to let them get weapons permits so that they could protect themselves. He pushed what I'm talking about back in 2020, and he traded 1,000 prisoners for one soldier. And so those were all things that are not real popular with many, at least on the conservative side of the aisle here in Israel. However, all of them have told me that I've talked to, right now, he's the guy we need. He's perhaps moderated some of his earlier optimism that there could be peace with our neighbors, our cousins over there in Gaza, without getting rid of Hamas. He thought that perhaps we could mollify Hamas with a little money, a little power, and sort of let them have some autonomy in Gaza. And they feel like he's, at the very least, learned his lesson, and he will. He's the guy that they need in charge right now. And you can see from what he said there in that quote, this guy, he's got his head in the right place when it comes to winning this war. He knows that winning is the only option for him, that anything that he pulls out of this conflict that looks the slightest bit like a loss is going to absolutely sink his political ship forever. Now, speaking of sinking ships, we have got another highly produced music video from the Houthis today. And this is a video of them sinking a ship called the Magic Seas. Now, I've got the audio turned down on this thing, but I'll let you watch it as we go through here. They have struck 2 ships in the last 2 days. This was the first one, called the Magic Seas, and the other one was called the, I think, Eternal Seas, something like that. Both of them Greek ships. These ones flagged in Liberia. Absolutely, positively nothing, zero to do with Israel. They just were in the wrong place at the wrong time, just happened to be there. And now you see commandos running along the deck. This is where it gets kind of cheesy. These guys, you can tell they've already been here. They already shot bullets into the windows. They already cleared the entire ship. Now they're mugging for the cameras, right? And show you, look at this guy. This guy weighs all of about 98 pounds, and he's like, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. This guy, he was riding a camel the day before yesterday. These are not like highly trained special operations troops. We're lucky if these guys know which end of the AK-47 to point at their enemies. But now what you'll see is them blowing this ship with charges that they placed along the hull. Now again, this ship was not hurting anybody. This had nothing to do with Israel, had nothing to do with the war. This is just the Houthis destroying things to show that they can still destroy things. And I'm going to talk more about the ceasefires in a minute and just how sort of ineffectual all of these various ceasefires have been with all the countries that are supposedly having ceasefires now. But it looks like the hopes of the Trump administration to bring a lasting peace are sinking along with this ship here. There it goes. That's it. Ship is going down. Goodbye. And the Houthis continue to make a nuisance of themselves in every way, shape, and form. But I mean, these guys are just punks. They're like a bunch of gangbangers running around that are just destroying things to try to prove that they can destroy things. They're not having any measurable effect on the war. They're not having any effect whatsoever on Israel's decision to prosecute the conflict in Gaza. They're not helping the Gazans in any way, shape, or form. They're just a sideshow. And it's unfortunate that they're victimizing commercial shipping that has nothing to do with the conflict, but that's all they got. So if you recall, when Operation Rough Rider was taking place and the United States was bombing the Houthis back a few weeks ago, President Trump sort of declared not a ceasefire. I mean, they have no written ceasefire. There's no official anything. President Trump just declared, okay, the war's going to stop now. And just by the sheer force of his will, stopped the war. He said it actually worked. Both sides. The Houthis said, okay, tell you what, we won't attack American ships in the Red Sea from now on, and we'll call that our version of the ceasefire. And for a while, they didn't attack any ships out there. They continued to fire missiles at Israel pretty much every day. There was one last night. Just actually, my neighbor here filmed the interception right back there behind me. So they're still doing that, but they haven't managed to strike any place or hurt anybody or, thank God, kill anything. That probably has more to do with God's sovereign protection over Israel than it has to do with, because the Houthis by this point have fired hundreds of missiles, likely at least over 100 at Israel, and drones and things like that. And so far they've managed to kill like one person and wound a couple more. And that's it. The numbers just don't add up because when you look at, for example, the conflict, the 12-day war with Iran, Iran fired 1,200 missiles and drones, and 28 people in Israel were killed. You know, there are some people in Israel who do not credit God for that miraculous outcome and say, no, it was our great technology, it was our great Air Force, it was our great this and that, right? But I think if you're a person of faith, there's no way you can look at that, and it just defies logic that only 28 people were killed. About 600 buildings were destroyed or damaged in that 12-day war here in Israel. 600. That's a lot. It's not enough to sway the course of the battle or anything, but it's a lot. And only 28 people were killed. That's astounding. And I think we should call it what it is. It's a miracle. Now, I do have some good news for. Oh, and I wanted to just wrap up the Houthi thing. They also struck another ship that I believe a couple people were actually killed on, a couple of the crew, and some others were wounded. So far, the Houthis have not managed to kill a lot of people with their strikes. But in this case, it looks like some sailors got unlucky. I'm honestly surprised that Greece is not striking Yemen at this point, because so much of these the shipping has belonged to Greece. If I was the Prime Minister of Greece, or I would be like, hey, it's time for our Air Force to get a little workout and get down there and do something about these Houthis. But truly, you could bomb the Houthis until, 2220, and you're not going to make that much of a difference, I don't think. I just don't. I just don't think that that's the way the Houthis are going to stop. At this point, they're just going to keep making a nuisance of themselves. You can't kill them all. They're going to keep making a nuisance of themselves until they decide to stop, or until they just get so economically debilitated. That's the one thing that the West has not been willing to do just yet, is actually wipe out their civilian infrastructure to the point where you just can't get anything. You just can't do anything. No power, no communications, no water, no anything. They're, civilized countries are just not willing to go there anymore. And that's just the way it is. So now I want to move on to some good news. By the way, folks, if you have questions, we've got over 1,000 people watching. So put your questions in all caps, and then I will try to get to them as I can over here. I see somebody asking about Jelani, al-Jelani in Syria. Keith Lewis says, I hear Jelani is visiting the White House. Do you think Trump and Netanyahu discussed that? Probably so. The IDF has been conducting raids into Syria almost every day over the last few days. And they still have troops on the ground in Syria. The Israelis don't plan on leaving Syria anytime soon. They've created a buffer zone just on their northern border now. They have thwarted several terrorist cells that were planning attacks on the Israeli people over the last several days in Syria. The question is, how much of that is being done with the coordination with the Jelani's forces, or in up against Jelani's forces? Are Jelani's forces assisting the Israelis in rooting out the terrorism in their midst, or are they the terrorists that the Israelis are having to take out? I think it's neither, really. I think the GSS is not really helping at all. They're not. They are willing to talk. But let me just show you something. And this is, folks, this is an exclusive. This is something that you will not see in the press, because I got it from a friend today who is in Syria. And she sent this to me. And this is a billboard that is up in Damascus, Syria, in the capital city, right now as we speak. Look at this billboard. Strong leaders make peace. Syrian people thank you. Together for a prosperous Syria. And you can see here, highly produced. They have a website, c4ssa.org. Very interesting that this is a billboard up in Damascus, Syria right now, thanking President Trump. Now, why would Golani be praising President Trump? Well, first of all, because he removed sanctions from Syria. They removed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham from the list of foreign terrorist organizations. So they are releasing the pressure on Syria and giving Jelani the breathing room he needs to form a new government, try to bring some stability and order to Syria. And while you can still color me skeptical, I'm still a little skeptical of all that. I think that at the very least, you could say that the Syrians are hopeful, because a lot of Syrians are moving back into Syria now, moving back into the areas that Jelani is in control of. Now, obviously, those people are not Kurds, Christians, Yazidis, Maronites, people like that. They're still very skeptical and are saying they're not going to join with al-Jelani, and they're going to keep control of the areas they currently control. But suffice it to say, Some people are hopeful, and many people are hopeful for sure. Okay, let's talk just for a minute about all this craziness going on in the world. Uh, it is obvious that the market is going to be volatile. I mean, the market sometimes climbs a wall of worry. If you didn't know, I was a stockbroker for 10 years in Washington, D.C., and I sold a lot of retirement funds. I mean, a lot. 401ks, IRAs, you name it. One of the things that I told people back then that I think is good advice is that as you get closer to retirement and get ready to start pulling money out of your retirement funds, you want to start moving them into assets that are a little less volatile than stocks. Because as you know, there's 1,000 things that can happen tomorrow that you and I can't plan for that could make the market tank. And you could lose, your 401k could turn into a 201k or a 101k, if you know what I mean. And so that's why I'm excited to be working with Preserve Gold. Preserve Gold is specializing in helping people open gold IRAs with your 401k money or your IRA money or some portion of it. They will give you all the consultation you need. They have experts that can lead you through the process. We're not talking about rolling everything over into gold, just a portion of your assets to put it into, as it says here on their website, wealth you can hold. Okay, so if you want to know more about that, you can text Chuck to 50505, get a free wealth guide, or you can go to their website, www.preservegold.com/hotzone. Again, these guys are solid. They operate on what I believe to be biblical principles, and I trust them, and you should too. So thank you to our sponsor for today's podcast, for Preserve Gold. All right. Now, we moved on. I have some good news for you. And again, I'm going to go back to those. I'll get to your questions as much as I can. I'm not sure if my uh, I'm not sure if my mods are updating my question list or not. If you are, somebody text me the link to the list so I can get them. If you're not, that's fine. I'll just scroll through it. So, good news. This is really nice, actually. A breath of fresh air in a news cycle that seems to be all tension and flare-ups and anger and all that. And that is that two former hostages, Sapir Cohen and Sasha Truvanov, are now engaged to be married. They were not dating at the time, as far as I understand, when they were both taken hostage on October 7th. One of them was in captivity for just over 50 days, and one of them was in captivity for just over 450 days. And now they're engaged to be married. So that's just awesome. I just wanted to kind of lighten it up a little bit with some good news for you today. Now, down in Gaza, first of all, you heard about the 5 soldiers that were killed, 5 IDF soldiers that were killed on a foot patrol. They were ambushed with IEDs. And then when the quick reaction force came to rescue them, they got lit up with small arms from an ambush. So it was what we call a double tap in some ways. That was in Beit Hanun, right across the border from Sderot. You can actually see it from Sderot. And what's happening now is that they are mounting a major operation surrounding the entire city of Beit Hanun and going into Beit Hanun with a vengeance. And they are going to find the people that did that, and those people are not long for this world. They've also been striking very hard in Khan Yunis and striking very hard just to the east of Gaza City. So there's a lot of heavy fighting going on in Gaza right now. Now, we keep hearing about this ceasefire deal that's imminent. Steve Witkoff is saying, we've narrowed it down from 4 hoops that we had to jump through, 4 sticking points, he called them, down to 1. We're just down to 1 sticking point. And that has to do with where the IDF will stay and where they will abandon in exchange for a ceasefire and getting their hostages back. 60-day ceasefire. As you know, the IDF right now controls about 75% of Gaza. They're about 70% probably. They're shooting for 75%. And they're not just clearing it, but clearing it and holding it as well. And what that does is squeezing Hamas into a smaller and smaller area. It's also squeezing the civilians into a smaller and smaller area. So, of course, the only news you're hearing out of the mainstream media, like the AP and Reuters, is that civilians are being just wasted left and right. And that's not exactly the case. I have a video here for you that we got today directly from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. This is, I don't think it's video that they're handing out to everybody, but we contacted them and asked them if we could get some footage of what they're doing in Gaza, and they sent us this footage, and I wanted to play it for you here while we're talking so you can see the aid that they're giving out. And you see here, these are staple foods, looks like cornflakes and flour and pasta. There's cooking oil. People are unpacking these boxes. Now, these are likely employees of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And this is where they're setting up the aid distribution. So what they do is they put one of these boxes about every meter, and then they let people in. They put it in a grid and they let people in. The people just clean out the boxes. And I guess they just leave all the trash behind. Why not? In Gaza at this point, that's an improvement. Okay. So to date, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has passed out more than 65 million meals, probably approaching 70 million meals. They're handing out food at a rate of about 2.5 to 3 million meals a day now. As I have reported before, but if you missed it, it's good to know. The cost of these meals is extremely low. When the Biden administration put in that ridiculous floating pier, or was or were airdropping MREs on top of the Gazans, in which a lot of Gazans got wounded and killed because pallets of MREs fell on their heads. I figured it out, and at one point, the United States taxpayer was on the hook for about $1,600 per meal, was how much the Biden administration was spending to try to get food into Gaza. Now, through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, they're delivering meals for something along the lines of $1.50 per meal. Much more reasonable. Now, you can still have a problem with that all being funded by the United States taxpayer, because honestly, I didn't agree for any of my tax dollars to go to support people who cheered on October 7th during the massacre. And I'm not saying that there's not any innocent people in Gaza. I'm not saying that those children deserve to starve or anything like that. I'm just saying that if you understand the concept of war and how war works, the easier you make it on your adversary, the longer the war will last. The harder you make it on your adversary, the shorter the war will last. Point, period, end of story. And if they were to just do what a lot of people here in Israel wish they would do, and that's cut off the aid completely and cut off the water and cut off the communications and everything else, then the war would be over in a matter of weeks. Easily. Easily. And they wouldn't have to go house to house and blow everything up. And it would actually turn out better for the people of Gaza, because as it stands right now, by shipping all this aid into Gaza and giving aid and sustenance to, maybe some civilians, but also to Hamas, I guarantee you that a lot of those military age males that are running around there in civilian clothes have worn a Hamas uniform at one time or another. Probably have one stashed away somewhere. So without a doubt, even though they're trying to only feed the people directly, they are also feeding Hamas, and they're feeding the populace that hides and supports Hamas. So in so doing, that means that Israel has to put more soldiers into the field. They've got to go house to house and search for weapons and military hardware and tunnels and everything like that. And when they find those, they blow those houses up. A lot more houses are being booby trapped, which means they get blown up. It is causing massive amounts of destruction inside Gaza. And that is destruction that doesn't have to happen, didn't have to happen. If they had absolutely cut off everything, you get no electricity, you get no water, you get no medical supplies, you get no food, you get no anything until we got our hostages back and you guys lay down your arms. Well, look, Hamas likes to weaponize the misery of the Palestinian people against Israel. This would be turnabout as fair play. Israel could weaponize the suffering of the Palestinian people against Hamas, because those people get hungry enough, they get thirsty enough, they're going to start turning over Hamas. Now, again, that's a brutal calculus, and that's a calculus that civilized nations are no longer willing to make. We once were. That's how we won World War II. There's might be a reason why we haven't definitively won a war since. And again, a lot of it, I think, goes back to the fact that we just don't have the stomach for it anymore. It's sad. It's tragic. I'd hate to see it have to happen. But if that was my kid in there, I'd be like, I don't want my tax dollars going to pay for those people to get fed. No, thank you. If Qatar wants to donate money to GHF, if Saudi Arabia wants to donate money to GHF, Jordan, Syria, any of those other countries, they want to do that, great. Why is it only the United States so far as I can tell, and some private donors, have been funding the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? Why is it the American taxpayer has to be on the hook for prolonging this war? We're working against ourselves. President Trump says he wants peace. He says peace is his highest aspiration, is his highest goal. Well, sometimes peace has to come through suffering, and you've got to be willing to get through the suffering so you can get to the peace. But if you keep putting off the suffering, the peace will never come. That's just my opinion. Okay. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but that's how I feel about it. Wayne Nell Jr. asks, do you think President Trump will have any effect in stopping Netanyahu's trial by criticizing it? I don't think I am well versed enough in the intricacies of Israeli judiciary to speak about how much a foreign leader could impact that. President Trump certainly is trying, without a doubt. He's doing the same thing, trying to weigh in at least on Jair Bolsonaro's trial in Brazil, which, for what it's worth, I agree with President Trump. I think that it's a witch hunt. And look, the president of Brazil, Lula, is a left-wing criminal extraordinaire and actually was in jail before he got out and ran for president again. He was in jail between the first time he was president and the second time he was president. So I just said, yeah, okay. So nevertheless, I don't know if President Trump could swing the needle at all on that or not. Okay, somebody in Hebrew with a Hebrew name said, they're quoting me, he took weapons away from people in the South so that they could protect themselves. This was Benny Gantz and Herschel Halevi, not Netanyahu. You're mixing your sources. Well, my understanding was that Netanyahu was certainly against people in the South being able to get their own weapons. This is before October 7th. And he put it in writing. I mean, if you read Netanyahu's books, he's very anti-Second Amendment, for lack of a better term. in the United States. He writes chapters about how he is very against allowing everyday citizens to carry firearms in order to protect themselves. Now, he may have moderated that stance in recent years because he wrote those words like back in the 1990s. But suffice it to say that at least at one time, Netanyahu was vehemently against allowing everyday civilians to carry weapons on their person for self-protection. Now, it may be that there are other politicians in that as well. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, actually, because that goes into something that I had a great discussion today about. So today, here's what I got to do. This was really cool. Don't those kibbutz have arms rooms? Sort of, not exactly. Most of those kibbutzim had security teams. Some of them were more robust than others. Some of them took it more seriously than others. And it was, they don't have an arms room in terms of like a bunch of military weapons that they can just open the arms room and pass them out to the people and they can protect themselves. It's more on a case-by-case basis. People who are actively serving in the military or on reserve status or whatever have more ability to keep a gun in their home than people who do not. But suffice it to say, many of the people that lived in the kibbutzim along the Gaza Strip, along the border, were pretty left-wing kibbutzim by and large, and were pro-Palestinian. They hired Palestinians. They didn't feel like they wanted guns. Right up, they didn't need them right up until they did. So there's that question. Martha K asked, both Hezbollah in Lebanon and IRGC in Iran and the Houthis in Yemen are on a very high alert and readiness in preparation for an Israeli strike. What do we know that we don't? You got that from Amir Tsarfati, and that's what I was talking about earlier. The Israelis did not agree in writing to an official ceasefire with Iran. They agreed to a truce for the time being, but they made it clear that as a part of that truce, they reserve the right to strike Iran again if they feel like it's necessary. They reserve the right to maintain air superiority over Iran. And so it's likely that there may be another attack because it seems like they are concerned, the Israelis are concerned that Iran is doing something that threatens Israel. Let's just put it that way. Now, I don't know if that has to do with their nuclear program or their missile program or what. They are shipping in new air defense from China. So they've just in recent days received a shipment of air defense rockets that are the most current generation from China. And you say like, what? Now, why would China do that? Well, in the same way that Ukraine is a laboratory for the West to test Western weapons, NATO weapons, against Russian weapons, Iran, in the eyes of China, is a laboratory where they can perhaps test out some of their highest generation, latest generation weapons, or offensive or defensive, against NATO or Western weapons. And I think they're going to be disappointed. Because Chinese weaponry is at least loosely based on old Soviet style weaponry. So obviously they've upgraded it and they've added all kinds of stuff, technologically to it. But bottom line is, I seriously doubt that Chinese technology can hold a candle to American technology at this point. And the Israelis have, if they see new air defense assets coming into Iran and getting set up around Fordo, let's say, then what they are seeing from an Israeli point of view is our window is closing to definitively make sure that Fordo never comes back online. And so we're going to have to take the opportunity to strike again. They had a plan to do it without U.S. intervention, and they may still put that plan into action. Now, I want to point something out to you. We've had conflict between Israel and Gaza, the Hamas. We've had conflict between Israel and the Houthis. We've had conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. We've had conflict between Israel and the Iranian-backed militias, the Hashishabi in Syria and Iraq. We've had conflict between Israel and Iran directly, and we've also had plenty of conflict, a lot more than gets reported, in Judea, Samaria, and Hebron. In most of those cases, with the exception of Judea, Samaria, and Hebron, there is at least some form of a truce or ceasefire in place. Also, I guess you would exempt right now Hamas from that. There's certainly not a ceasefire there. President Trump has been pushing very hard to try to get some sort of lasting peace in this region. But in reality, I just want to tell you, in my opinion, all of that is just political theater, because in reality, there's no ceasefire anywhere. Israel is striking and striking hard inside Lebanon on a daily basis. They're still taking out Hezbollah leaders in targeted drone strikes, targeted eliminations. They're still taking out tunnel complexes, weapons depots, all sorts of military infrastructure wherever they can find it. The Israelis still have troops on the ground in Lebanon, fighting, doing missions. Does that sound like a ceasefire to you? Doesn't to me. Israel still has troops on the ground that are doing combat missions in Syria. They're still, from time to time, making things spontaneously combust in Syria. Does that sound like a ceasefire? There have been things that have been suddenly experiencing sudden rapid disassembly in Iran as well over the last week or two. Since the cessation of hostilities between Israel and Iran, there is still stuff going boom in there. Now, there's a case to be made that could be opposition forces inside Iran that are trying to further destabilize the government. Or it could be Mossad agents that are still running amok around Iran and causing things to just catch fire. We don't exactly know. But it doesn't appear to me that we have any kind of a lasting ceasefire if Israel is saying, yeah, we still reserve the right to strike you anytime that it looks like we need to. You know, we're going to smack you when you need to be smacked. And we're going to maintain our air supremacy over the region so that we will have the wherewithal to do that whenever we get the inclination. That doesn't sound like a ceasefire to me. Israel has continued to strike the Houthis even after the United States quit. There's no ceasefire down there either. Israel has been mounting very large operations in Judea, Samaria, and the Hebron, and they have thwarted several large smuggling rings and terrorist cells in those West Bank areas in the last week or two. They have picked up scads of weapons and explosives, and they've arrested more than 100 people just in the last week in just Nablus alone. So where is there a ceasefire exactly? Where is there, are things cooling down? Now, I'm not making the case at all that Israel is losing or is falling apart. On the contrary, Israel is winning. Israel is striking its enemies everywhere they hide. They're striking them in 6 different places at this point. And they're winning. They're doing it very effectively. The losses that they are experiencing are trivial to the point where it's, like I said at the beginning of this, it's practically miraculous that their losses have not been greater. And I think it would be the height of hubris on the part of Israelis not to give glory to Hashem and say, no, this could not have just been us. We can't chalk this up to our technical superiority or our willingness to work harder or our motivation, leadership, funding. No, this is the Most High God looking over His people, and I just think you can't repeat that enough. Now, Set the Hook 2 times said, why this people relying the aid? How much more? I think you're talking about the Gazans. Why are they relying on this aid? Because they don't produce anything of consequence. They can't support themselves. They've never been able to support themselves in Gaza, and part of the reason for that is because they've become dependistan. They're just used to depending on aid from without. And one of the things we've seen all over the world is that it's almost like the world looked at the inner city of America and said, wow, welfare works so good at getting people to get out there and work harder and make it on their own and get off the dole. Let's try that in Gaza. Because it didn't work in the United States. It didn't work in Africa. It didn't work in Haiti. It hasn't worked anywhere. When you make people dependent, you stunt their ability to take care of themselves. And that's certainly what's happened in Gaza, to say nothing of the fact that they've taken much of the aid that they could have used to improve their situation and used it to try to kill Israelis. But there is that. Okay, I wanted to say thank you to Mama Marissa. Buy Oscar a cheese latte. Oscar is not feeling so hot, so pray for Oscar, would you? He picked up some kind of plague in Jordan yesterday, I believe, and he was not looking good by the time we got home today. Okay, so we're coming down to this. I want to share with you what I did today. This was really, really cool. Now, first, to do that, we got to go to the map. So let's go take a look at the map. I'm now in Jerusalem. So let's see here if I can move this up so I can go point at the map. I'm here in Jerusalem, and today we drove about an hour south to Hebron. Now you can see here this dotted line is the boundary of what the people in the West call the West Bank. It's not the West Bank. This is Samaria, Judea, and Hebron down here. Those are the traditional Israeli names for those. And we went to Hebron because we were invited to go down there and see something really cool, really, really cool. And these are the pictures of it here. It's called the Tomb of the Patriarchs. And the Tomb of the Patriarchs there's another picture of it right there. The Tomb of the Patriarchs is a couple 1,000-year-old structure that was built by Herod. There's some more pictures of it. Built by Herod. There's a good shot of the outside. These walls look just like the walls on the Western Wall, and for the reason being, they were both built by Herod. Now, this part up on the top here was added later. This minaret was added in the 13th century. But what you're looking at here is Second Temple period, about the time of Christ. What's inside this structure? It's a very large structure, and it's very sacred. As a matter of fact, it's the second most sacred site in Judaism, what I was told today. Well, what's inside this structure is the tombs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their wives. So they're the patriarchs, as you know. Uh, that was the founders of Israel. Those couples birthed a nation, the nation of Israel. And the man whose name was changed to Israel is there buried there in those tombs. Now the tombs are in caves underneath, and the building was built on top of it. And you can't get down into the caves. I really would like to, but they won't let you down in there. Over the years, this structure has changed hands. For a period of time, it was controlled by the Muslims, and they essentially turned it into a mosque, added the minarets, and you'll see on the inside they decorated it up in traditional Muslim style. Now it's controlled since 1967 by the Israelis, but they still allow Muslims to come there and pray, because Muslims share the same patriarchs. They just call them prophets. They don't obviously believe what's written in the Bible. Even though the Quran was written thousands of years after most of these things took place, they don't believe any of that. So they still want to worship there. They still want to pray there. So the Israelis allow the Muslims to come and pray, and the Israelis come and pray, the Jews come and pray. They have to separate the two for obvious reasons. You have still have a lot of problems with terrorism and that sort of thing. So this building is separated up into sections, and there's a part for the Muslims, there's a part for the Israelis. They have bulletproof glass in between, and it's amazing. So I want to just show you just a taste of what we saw today. Now I'm going to be putting out a full episode about our trip down there today, because we just had a great time. Yishai Fleischer, who, if you don't follow him on YouTube, you should. He's very popular on YouTube. Was kind enough to meet us there and give us a full walkthrough tour today. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of what we saw. So, no, that's not it. Here we go. This is inside. And here you've got one of the tombs. You've got Jewish people there praying. And there's a guy over there who's praying. There's the tomb of Abraham. Isn't that amazing? Now, again, the actual tombs are underneath all of that. Those are just sort of placeholders. Like, think of them as large tombstones that you can sort of orient yourself toward and go, yeah, underneath there is where Abraham was buried. But absolutely fascinating. Not just fascinating because of the site itself, but because of the whole area. Hebron is one of the places where Jews have lived the longest. And they've had a continuous presence there. And there are still about 1,000 Jews that live in the old city of Hebron. Obviously, they're surrounded by about 250,000 Arabs, and that makes things a little tense at times, to say the least. Yishai also took me up on top of a mountain right next to there, overlooking the Tomb of the Patriarchs, and took me to an archaeological dig up on the top, an old Hebron. They are uncovering an incredible old city that used to be situated on top of the hill just over there. And we're talking about much older. We're talking about more than 4,000 years old. There's one wall they found that predated the Jews getting there. So it was absolutely unbelievable to see. Not only that, but this is a new archaeological dig that they're just starting, and they are already finding just buckets of artifacts. I got pictures of a coin that they found. They usually have to use a metal detector to find that stuff. They found this coin. He showed it to me today. I uploaded a picture of that over at chuckholton.com if you want to go see it. Pottery, artifacts, shards of this, mosaic tiles. Unbelievable, the stuff that they're coming up. And this is the thing, as you're driving around Israel, you get the sense that, oh my goodness, the 1 hour drive from Jerusalem down to Hebron, you're driving through areas, and everywhere you look, there are ruins of an ancient civilization. 99.9% of those ruins have never been excavated. They've never been studied. There's very little that's been done to them. There's too much. They just can't get to it all. And it's mind-boggling the history that you're just completely immersed in when you're here. And that's one of the funnest things about my job, getting to come here and do little side trips like that. That all works into a story we're making about the 5 sheikhs in Hebron that are trying to break away from the Palestinian Authority and join to Israel and actually recognize Israel as a sovereign nation, join the Abraham Accord. And so we'll see where that goes. One of those sheikhs had his car set on fire last night as a warning to try to scare him off. So we're going to do a story about that, and you have to stay tuned, and we'll see how that goes. All right, folks, we are coming down to the end here. Let's go to some more questions. I'm going to go backwards because that's what my computer wants me to do, apparently. Do we know the Gaza, this is Vicky McCollum asks, do we know the Gaza humanitarian helpers are not part of Hamas? No, I don't think they do. However, those guys, I mean, they're getting paid and they are putting their lives at risk because Hamas has threatened to kill the families of anybody who goes to work for GHF. So these guys are laying it on the line for sure. But I imagine they're getting paid pretty well to do so. But I don't think there's any tangible or any feasible way of vetting these people to the extent they would need to be vetted to find out whether or not they've ever worn a Hamas uniform. Don't know. All right, so question from Denise. Do you think that Netanyahu would really consider it being an emirate now for Hebron? Well, possibly. This would be about as close as you could get to some sort of two-state solution. Actually, there's something similar happening in Gaza. There's a militant group, Abu Shabab, I think is what they call themselves, the popular mobilization units or something like that, popular something like that. And popular mobilization force, I think is what they're calling themselves. And they're down in Rafah. It's a clan, it's a family, very powerful family. And what they're doing is they're going to form a humanitarian city. Now, this is an interesting idea, like a giant walled city inside Rafah, a big gated community, so to speak, protected not by the IDF, but by this militant group that is countering Hamas now. And they claim, now this is their own claim, so it can't be corroborated, but they claim they've had tens of thousands of people sign up to come live there under their authority. Now, if they did go in and decide to live there, I guess the IDF is saying they wouldn't be allowed to leave. And the IDF is saying we would support that. We would help to vet the people to make sure that no Hamas people get into this. I don't know how you do that unless you just say this entire city is going to be made up only of women, children, and perhaps the elderly. No military age males allowed. That would be the only way I could see them being able to make sure that none of those people were Hamas. But the idea, I guess, is to take an area that's been cleared. There are apparently it's been searched. There's no weapons, there's no missiles, there's no rockets, anything like that. Building a pop-up city, tent city, sounds like a camp to me. Putting a fence around it, hiring these local clans to guard it from Hamas, and vetting the people coming in so that everybody inside is considered to be safe, and then not letting them leave. I don't know how that is going to work out, but hey, anything's worth a shot. So that just tells me that Israel is looking for creative options to try to wind this thing down. Okay. Odds on hearing beeper guy or ambulance guy. Well, both of them have already been here and gone tonight, so I'm thinking that maybe we won't hear them. Let's see. Just looking through the last few dozen comments. Thank you very much, Vicky, for Oscar. Okay, well, I'll go get him some soup. Maybe that'll make him feel better. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the gifts. If you guys want to support what we're doing, you can go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there. That's really the best way to future-proof our work against the craziness of YouTube. Crazy things have been happening with YouTube lately. A lot of creators are complaining about it. Comments just sort of spontaneously combusting and going away, not being moderated away, just comments being deleted. Apparently, if you talk about things like what's happening in this part of the world and use certain terms, your video is now not getting demonetized, but it's getting shadow banned. So the last 6 or 7 lives that I've done have been really down in the dumps as far as views and as far as new viewers. We used to have about 60%, 50 to 60% of all of our viewers of every live were people that were coming in for the first time that had never watched us before. Over the last week or two, well, no, I wouldn't say two, over the last week, the number of new viewers watching these lives is like almost zero, like almost nobody is a new viewer. And then what that says is YouTube is not pushing our channel anymore. And we're not sure why. We're reaching out to YouTube to find out, like, hey, was it something we said? What's going on here? But it just sort of defies logic that you'd be actually losing subscribers on every single video for the last 6 videos when we were gaining subscribers at a rate of up to 1,000 new subscribers per video the week before that. So go figure. And all that to say that if you really want to support us, go to chuckholton.com, buy me a coffee over there, and I really appreciate it. If you want to give here on YouTube, that's fine. If you want to give through the link tree, we've got PayPal, Venmo, all that stuff. Thank you very much. We appreciate everything, and we're going to try to put it to good use to bring you lots of good content and help people along the way. So be watching. If you're a supporter over at chuckholton.com, you're going to get early access to the episode about what we did today in Hebron. You're going to love it. It's really cool. And thank you very much for watching. God bless you. And why don't you get your own application so you can talk freely? Well, I do that from time to time over on Locals, and that's great. But as it turns out, YouTube is where the money is, because the views on YouTube pay better than Rumble, pay better than Locals, and anything else. That's why. Question, how long will Oscar be there? He's going to stay as long as I'm here, which is to the end of this month. So we're going to be rocking it. We got lots of good stories coming, and we're going to take you to see the site of some of the missiles that fell and show you what's around them in the coming days. So stay tuned for that. I want to just say a special shout out before we leave to Mama Marissa and all of our mods, Amy, Rubina, Connie, Nathan. You guys keep the chat clean, keep it fun, and help me out a lot by posting those links and everything whenever I mention something. I appreciate that a lot. And so you guys are great. Thank you very much for doing that. Okay, well, that's all I got for tonight. God bless you. And let's hope that there's absolutely nothing for me to report tomorrow, because everything's just, nothing's happening. Actually, that would be worth reporting right there. So there we go.